Today I'm doing a review of my Assembly of God history class by Dr. Skoma. So I'm just going to share some kind of random and facts over history of Assembly of God. So the Reformed leaders responded to the idea of the restoration of the Holy Spirit's power by believing in his salvation. Charles Parham taught that tongues is the evidence of the baptism of the Holy Spirit as the initial evidence. Many Pentecostals disagree in the value of the book of Acts, which I thought was really interesting. I would have thought that that was the book that we all could have agreed on, because Pentecostalism is usually focused on the power of the Holy Spirit, baptism of the Holy Spirit, tongues, which is what the book of Acts really was all about from front to back. William Durham was the Pentecostal leader that preached the finished work of Calvary that was stirring and divisive in the church at that time. Voluntary cooperation has always been the hallmark of the Assembly of God faith. The first the first Assembly of God superintendent was N. Bell, was her name, or his name. I guess I should look that up. The second General Council was actually held in Chicago, Illinois. Assembly of God had 3 debates between 1914 and 1927. The topics were tongues as the initial evidence, universalism, and the nature of the Godhead. The General Council actually started a deaf ministry under the leadership of L.C. Peters. D.C.'s Nelson Bible Doctrine was printed by the Gospel Publishing House that became a popular manual which provided a working knowledge of the Assembly of God beliefs and was written in plain English. A minister named Marie Stephanie, known as the Mother of Peace, served in China during the time when there was a lot of drug wars and famines in the Chinese culture. One of the best known Assembly of God ministers was a gal named Hattie Hammond. She ministered with the AG for 67 years. What an accomplishment. A lot of people don't even live that long, so that's pretty amazing. The rise of the New Order of the Latter Rain was based on the concern that the days of power and Pentecostal movement seemed over. Healing evangelism ministry overseas is where missionaries actually prayed for the sick, and they used that to advertise their camp meetings, which I thought was very ironic and unique. 1959, the General Council in San Antonio, Texas was very big because it was an election of the second generation of Pentecostal leaders born in the 20th century. One of my heroes in the faith, Billy Graham, which I had the opportunity this last weekend to go to the gravesite of his spiritual mothers, Henrietta and Margaret Mears. Billy influenced the General Council to condemn racism, which is one of my callings, is to bring racial, family reconciliation. J.W. Tucker's had a martyrdom's death, resulted in many salvations because the custom required a tribe to listen to his gospel since his blood had mingled in their river. So that was a very interesting story. The Holy Spirit Conference of 1982, Thomas Zimmerman warned versus extremes of withdrawing from the world and focused on social activism to the exclusion of spreading the gospel. There was a Juma prayer fellowship known as the Global Initiative now, which is all about reaching Muslims, which I thought was cool because I have an uncle, Mark Seljander, who has dedicated his life to reaching the Muslim community. And I got to know Leif Hetland in Atlanta, who also does the same. And I was able to actually connect the two, which was awesome. J. Robert Ashcroft served as National Secretary of Education and president of several Assembly of God colleges. George Wood, who recently passed away, actually has run the Assembly of God for many years as the president. His 5 core values was proclaiming Jesus Christ, investing in the next generation, planting churches, re-inspiring existing ones, and resourcing our fellowship, prayer for favor. The Executive Presbytery added 4 positions, bringing in ministers under the age of 40. So they considered that apparently older, 40 and over. Ordaining females, which was a big deal. Ministers coming in thirdly from a third language area. And then lastly, putting their blessing on African Americans becoming ministers. So, the Network for Women Ministers exists to develop, mentor, resource vocational ladies and prepare women for ministry. So, I had the opportunity of actually interviewing one of the local female Assembly of God ministers who's in her 60s. She's been a minister there with over 30 years and was encouraged that George Wood's funeral was actually done at one of the local places where they do the National Women's Conferences. And she had talked about the vast reach that AG has on bringing in female ministers, which is encouraging. The General Council in 2009, there was 4 reasons for added for being an Assembly of God. It was focused on demonstrating compassion. That was the 4th area that they focused on. Religious knowns are people with no actual religious affiliation. The establishment of Western colonial empires affected American foreign missions by giving missionaries access to areas closed to the gospel. The goals of indigenous principles were not achieved because of failure to see missions work as founding of the national church. A.B. Simpson led the CMA, which is the Christian Missionary Alliance, which is a very strong missionary movement. And missionaries got support in the early days by publications served as collecting agencies through missionaries' funds that were forwarded overseas. And then lastly, AG missionaries had no formal education back in the day, so they actually learned by going over and participating in their cultures and learning their languages wherever they actually ministered. So that was our AG history class that I learned a lot. Very thankful to take.